Wheel of denial, turn, turn, turn. Tell us the dunce cap that we should earn. And if you get that reference, you're awesome. Trickle-down economics is basically the idea that if the rich are doing very well, then their success will translate to success for the rest of us. And this is generally done through tax cuts. They have more money to invest in the business, which expands the company, creating more jobs and providing a living for more people. And after all, people need economic incentives so that they'll work harder at their current job because they'll be able to be more successful later. The problem is, all of this has proven to be false. Instead of investing their record-breaking profits back into the company so that they can increase the wages and therefore the living standard of their workers, they're hoarding the money for themselves. CEO compensation back in 1978 was 26.5 times that of the average worker, whereas now it's roughly 206 times. From 1978 to 2011, CEO compensation went up 725%. And the average worker's compensation went up 5.7%. Their success has not translated to success for the average worker. The top 1% of households from 1979 to 2007 got 59.9% of economic gains, and the top 0.1% got 36%. By comparison, the bottom 90% of households got 8.6%. Just let all this information sink in for a bit. On what factual basis can anyone claim that trickle-down economics has translated to success for the overall society? It does not. It has not. It would seem it only benefits the very rich. Because the rich save such a large percentage of their money by comparison to the average person, they don't create as much economic activity. 70% of economic activity is consumer spending, and the heart of that is the middle class. And when they don't have as much money to contribute to that activity, the economy slumps. And considering that since the recession, 95% of economic gains have gone to the top 1%, it's obvious why we're doing so poorly. There's barely a difference between someone who's middle class and poor now. And people ask, well, wait a minute, but if jobs don't come from the top and they don't come from expansion, then where do they come from? But it's not that jobs don't come from expansion, it's that the company can't expand jobs when it's expanding its profits at the expense of workers' wages and the number of workers they have. Most of the jobs we've been adding here recently have been part-time jobs. Instead of having seasonal workers, they have people from a temp agency. Or they have people who are working part-time instead of full-time because they don't have to worry about these workers as much. They're more dispensable. They don't have to give them benefits. They don't have to pay them as much. They don't have to worry about these people having upward mobility, which is another problem. Roughly half the people born into poverty today will stay poor, which means that economic incentives don't work, because there isn't upward mobility. Driving down wages is a tactic that companies have used to gain short-term success, and you'll notice here recently that they've gained a kind of tunnel vision for only short-term gains. Around 1978, our wages stopped increasing with productivity, but if they'd kept up with that and taking into account inflation, right now it would be over $21 an hour, minimum. 3 times what it is right now. When the minimum wage was instituted, it was meant to be a living wage, not even just a surviving wage. But the very idea before 1978 that you could work a full-time job and be in poverty was unthinkable. And now it's commonplace to have 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. That's people who are still trying to just scrape by in life. God forbid one of them gets sick or injured. Whole other issue. The only reason we've gotten to this point and people have lost perspective about what the minimum wage is supposed to be is because around 1978, women went into the workforce in greater numbers, people started putting themselves into debt more, and they started working more jobs and more hours. These tactics of dealing with our wages stagnating have finally run their course, and they're now insufficient. So people in the overall society are feeling these harsh effects of an economic system that quite frankly has left them behind. It's unsustainable. It's meant for short-term and not long-term success. Jobs come from the middle out, because when you invest in the middle class, you invest in your customer's ability to buy your goods and services. It's a symbiotic relationship, and right now, it's parasitic. This is where not only the tax breaks, but the tax loopholes and shipping jobs overseas come in, because these are symptoms of a system that is bent to work for the rich and not for the rest of us. And how do we solve this problem? The government has to regulate the market, as they once did during the most prosperous time in this country, when we never saw a top marginal tax rate lower than 70%. The economy worked based on a very simple cycle. When productivity rises, wages increase, workers buy more and companies hire more, tax revenues increase and the government invests more, workers are better educated, and the economy continues to expand with healthy growth because the middle class benefits from that growth. Currently, they do not. And since there's no such thing as a free market, government sets the rules by which the market functions. We have to have control of the government. But when wealth is concentrated this much, it's inevitable that we lose control, and we have to get our democracy back. And the solution to this, in my very humble opinion, is wolf-pack.com. Link below. When we hold the reins of our government, we have power enough to ensure that the private sector isn't systematically fucking us. When people ask, whom should we emulate? My answer is the United States. Back when we had a functioning economy. Before trickle-down economics. Long days and pleasant nights. The very rich are doing very well, then their success will translate to On what factual basis can anyone claim that trickle-down economics, fickle with the fucking On what factual basis can anyone claim triple down? It's the fucking football game of economics over here, god damn it. I so don't know anything about sports. What are we even talking about anymore? Because the average rich Persian. Because the average rich Persian. How racist. And considering that since the recession, what? Something. I'm sure there are words that want to come out of my fucking face, but they won't. And considering that since the recession, 95% of economic gains have gone to the games. Economic games. Yes, the rich are playing economic games, but I'm trying to say gains, so let's say these things right.